unlimited drama series.
The smell of fish sauce at 1 in the morning should have been my first clue that revenge was already cooking in my subconscious. I was elbow deep in our kitchen sink, wrestling with a pipe that had decided to stage its own little rebellion, when I heard Vanessa's BMW purr into the driveway. Again. For the third time this week, she was rolling in past midnight from another emergency client meeting. I'm Eddie Price, and I fix things for a living. Cabinets, leaky faucets, broken marriages. Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. At 39, I've learned that most problems have solutions if you're willing to get your hands dirty. What I hadn't counted on was my wife of 11 months, treating our marriage like a fixer-upper she'd already decided to flip. Eddie, what are you doing up? Vanessa's voice carried that particular tone she used when I wasn't behaving according to her script. She dropped her designer purse on the counter with the kind of careless thud that said money wasn't an object, which was funny, considering it was my money paying for that purse. Pipe burst, I said, not looking up. Figured I'd handle it before we had to call an expensive plumber, like a responsible homeowner. She didn't catch the dig. Vanessa never did unless it was wrapped in legal terminology and served with a court summons. Well, I'm exhausted. Riley had me working on the Morrison case until all hours. Riley Chen was her lawyer friend, the kind of woman who treated other people's marriages like hostile corporate takeovers. I'm going to bed. Sure thing, honey. Sweet dreams. But as she headed upstairs, her purse made a sound. Not the usual jangle of keys and credit cards, a buzz. Then another. Text messages coming in fast and urgent. The kind that make people check their phones at 1:30 in the morning. Curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and took a peek. 2 phones. She had 2 phones in that purse. The second one, a sleek little iPhone I'd never seen before, was lighting up like a Christmas tree. The preview messages were enough to make my stomach drop and my blood pressure spike. Can't wait to see you tomorrow, beautiful. Greg here. Tonight was incredible. Same time Thursday. You drive me crazy, V. When are you leaving him? Greg. I knew exactly who Greg was. Greg, the Gator. Halpern. Visiting MBA professor at the local university. Flashy car, flashier smile. And apparently a taste for married women. I'd met him at exactly one faculty party, where he'd spent the entire evening name-dropping his connections and hitting on anything in a skirt. I took pictures. Not because I'm some kind of private investigator, but because I learned in Afghanistan that documentation saves lives. Sometimes it saves marriages, too. Sometimes it ends them. The next morning, I made revenge chili for breakfast. Extra hot sauce, extra beans, extra everything that would make a guilty conscience burn. When Vanessa stumbled down in her silk robe, the one I'd bought her for our 6-month anniversary, I had a steaming bowl waiting. Chili? For breakfast? She wrinkled her nose like I'd offered her roadkill. Figured we could both use something with a little kick to start the day. I took a big spoonful and smiled. You look tired, Ness. Those late nights catching up with you? Something flickered in her eyes. Guilt? Fear? Hard to tell with Vanessa. She'd perfected the art of plausible deniability long before she started cheating. I told you, the Morrison case is consuming my life right now. Right, the Morrison case. I nodded thoughtfully. Funny thing about cases, they usually have file numbers, court dates, that sort of thing. Public record stuff. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all, just thinking out loud. I finished my chili and stood up. I've got a job over on Maple Street today. Kitchen renovation. Should be home by 6. Okay. She was studying me now, trying to figure out if I knew something or if I was just being my usual sarcastic self. Oh, and Ness? Mrs. Stokes mentioned she saw you practicing yoga the other night, around 11. She was impressed by your flexibility. Mrs. Stokes was our 70-something neighbor who treated neighborhood watch like an Olympic sport. If a leaf fell in the wrong yard, she knew about it. If my wife was sneaking around, she definitely knew about it. Vanessa went pale. I don't know what she's talking about. Probably nothing. You know how these old ladies are, always seeing things that aren't there. I grabbed my tool bag and headed for the door. Have a great day, sweetheart. Try not to work too hard. But as I walked to my truck, I was already planning phase two. Because if there's one thing I learned in the service, it's that the best defense is a good offense. And Vanessa had just declared war on our marriage. She just didn't know I was already 3 moves ahead. The Blue Moose wasn't much to look at. Sticky floors, neon beer signs, and the kind of clientele that paid in cash and minded their own business. But it was my kind of place, and more importantly, it was where Marty Sullivan held court every night behind the bar. Marty had been my sergeant in Afghanistan, and he'd saved my life more times than either of us cared to count. Now he saved my sanity with cheap whiskey and cheaper advice. So let me get this straight, Marty said, polishing a glass with practiced efficiency. Your wife of 11 months is banging some professor, planning to take you for half your assets, and you're sitting here drinking like it's just another Tuesday? It is just another Tuesday. I took another sip of bourbon. And she's not taking anything. See, that's where this gets interesting. I'd spent the afternoon doing research instead of kitchen renovation. Amazing what you can find in public records when you know where to look. Marriage licenses, divorce decrees, immigration documents. It's all there if you're patient enough to dig. Vanessa's got a problem, Marty. She's still married. To you, yeah. To a Ukrainian guy named Viktor Petrov. Married him 18 months ago, right around the time she started getting serious with me. Never divorced him. I pulled out my phone and showed him the documents I'd photographed at the county clerk's office. Turns out our marriage isn't legal. Makes it real hard to claim palimony when you're technically a bigamist. Marty whistled low. Jesus, Eddie, she's running a con. Gets better. Victor's not her first Ukrainian husband. Found records for 2 others over the past 5 years. Same pattern. Marriage, money transfers. Then they disappear back to Eastern Europe while she moves on to the next mark. War bride scam? War bride scam. And I'm the idiot who thought I was special. I finished my bourbon and signaled for another. But here's the thing about cons, Marty. They only work if the mark doesn't know he's being played. So what's the plan? First, I'm going to have a little chat with Professor Gator. See how he feels about being the other man to a woman who's already got 3 other men. Eddie, relax. No violence. I'm not going to prison over this. But Greg's got a reputation to protect, and reputations are fragile things. That night, I followed Vanessa to Greg's condo. Sleek glass building downtown, the kind of place that screamed, I'm compensating for something. I parked across the street with a thermos of coffee and a telephoto lens I'd borrowed from my photographer buddy Jake. The photos were everything I needed. Vanessa going in at 8 p.m., coming out at midnight, hair messed up, clothes wrinkled. Greg standing at his window in a bathrobe, watching her leave like some kind of lovesick teenager. But the real gold mine was inside the condo. Breaking and entering is a felony. However, when the sliding door to the balcony is wide open and there's no sign saying, keep out, well, that's just poor home security. I'd learned a thing or two about reconnaissance in the army, and Greg's place was easier to infiltrate than a Taliban cave. The man kept everything. Love letters from at least 6 different women, including 2 of his graduate students. Financial documents showing he was leveraged up to his eyeballs. The Tesla, the condo, even his furniture was financed. And best of all, a journal where he detailed his conquests, like some kind of middle-aged Casanova. Vanessa was entry number 43. He'd rated her performance and made notes about her divorce timeline and asset potential. Real romantic stuff. I left everything exact. Where I found it, but not before taking pictures of the most damaging pages. Then, I decided to leave Greg a little present. Fish sauce in the air conditioning system is an old army prank. Harmless, but memorable. The smell takes weeks to fade, and it gets worse every time you turn on the AC. I also keyed home wrecker into the trunk of his precious Tesla and left a dead mackerel in the frunk. Childish? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. The next morning, Vanessa was unusually quiet over coffee. She kept checking her phone, both of them, with increasing agitation. Everything okay, honey? I asked, buttering my toast with exaggerated care. Fine, just work stuff. Greg stuff, you mean? She froze. What? Greg Morrison. The Morrison case you've been working on. With Riley. I took a bite of toast and smiled. That is what you meant, right? Right, yes. Greg Morrison. She was flustered now, trying to keep her story straight. Funny thing about the Morrison case, I continued. I looked it up yesterday. No Greg Morrison on the court dockets. No Morrison case at all, actually. But I'm sure it's just an administrative error. Vanessa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and went white. Problem? No, I have to go. Early meeting. She grabbed her purse and practically ran for the door. I waited until her BMW disappeared around the corner, then called Marty. How'd you like to do a little bartending detective work? I'm listening. Riley Chen drinks at Murphy's every Thursday night. Girls' night out. Think you could arrange to be there? Maybe strike up a conversation about marriage law? Eddie, what are you planning? Just gathering intelligence, Sergeant. Just gathering intelligence. Because if Vanessa wanted to play games, I was going to make sure I knew all the rules. And more importantly, I was going to make sure everyone else knew them too. Riley Chen turned out to be everything I expected and worse. Blonde highlights, designer clothes, and the kind of predatory smile that said she viewed other people's misery as billable hours. She was holding court at Murphy's, surrounded by her usual crowd of wannabe legal eagles and divorced women looking for validation. Marty had positioned himself perfectly, close enough to overhear, but far enough away to seem uninterested. The man could blend into any crowd. Another skill from our Army days that translated surprisingly well to civilian bartending. The thing about Palimony, Riley was saying, loud enough for half the bar to hear, is that it's not about the marriage certificate. It's about economic partnership. If a woman contributes to a relationship for a significant period, she's entitled to compensation when it ends. Even if they've only been married 11 months? Asked one of her disciples. Especially then. The shorter the marriage, the more obvious it is that the man was using her. Classic pump and dump strategy. Riley took a sip of her Cosmopolitan. I've got a client right now. Beautiful woman, married to this blue-collar loser who thinks he can just walk away with everything because he owned the house before they met. She's going to take him for half his assets, plus damages for emotional distress. Marty caught my eye from across the bar and nodded. He'd heard enough. But Riley wasn't done. The best part is, the guy has no idea what's coming. Men like that, they think they're so smart with their little tools and their manual labor. They never see the real power play until it's too late. That's when I decided to accelerate my timeline. The next morning, I confronted Vanessa directly. No more games, no more subtle hints. Time to see what cards she was really holding. We need to talk, I said when she came downstairs. I'd laid out printed copies of all my evidence on the kitchen table like a poker hand. Marriage certificates, immigration documents, bank transfers. Photos of her entering Greg's building. Vanessa stopped dead when she saw the papers. For a moment, her mask slipped completely, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. Where did you get these? Public records are public, Ness. Amazing what you can find when you actually look. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down. Let's discuss your Ukrainian husbands. She didn't sit. Instead, she grabbed her phone and started dialing. Riley, it's me. We need to accelerate the timeline. No, he knows. I don't care what it costs. Just do it. She hung up and looked at me with pure venom. You think you're so clever, don't you, Eddie? Playing private investigator, digging through records like some kind of stalker. I prefer concerned husband, but stalker works too. Well, here's something for your little investigation. She smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. Riley says I'm entitled to half of everything you own. The house, your business, your tools, even your truck. 11 months of marriage, and I get 50%. That's the law. Interesting theory. There's just one problem. What's that? We're not married. I slid Viktor Petrov's marriage certificate across the table. Bigamy's a felony, Vanessa. Makes it real hard to claim spousal rights when you're already somebody else's wife. 3 somebody else's, actually. For the first time since I'd known her, Vanessa was speechless. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to pack your things and leave. Today. You're going to tell Riley that you've reconsidered the lawsuit, and you're going to disappear from my life like you never existed. And if I don't, then I call Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Then I call the district attorney.
Don't leave. Let me explain.
Explain a shade I don't know.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Then I call the local news station, because they love stories about marriage fraud. I leaned back in my chair. Your choice, sweetheart. She stared at me for a long moment, then started laughing. Not the reaction I was expecting. You really think it's that simple? That you can just threaten me and I'll run away? She pulled out her phone again and showed me a video file. Recognize this? It was security footage from Greg's building. Me breaking into his condo. Me vandalizing his car. Me clearly committing multiple felonies. Greg's got cameras everywhere, Eddie. Paranoid about his precious possessions. This footage is already copied to the cloud, already shared with Riley. Her smile was back, sharp as a knife. So here's what's really going to happen. You're going to give me exactly what I want, or I'm going to have you arrested for breaking and entering, vandalism and stalking. How's that going to look for your little handyman business? Vanessa, I want the house. I want half your business assets. And I want $50,000 in cash for the emotional trauma you've caused me. She stood up and smoothed down her skirt. You've got 24 hours to think about it. After that, I file charges and sue you for everything you're worth. She headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Eddie? Greg says thanks for the fish smell. Really brought back memories of his childhood by the docks. He's going to enjoy testifying against you. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with my evidence and the sinking realization that I'd just been outplayed by a professional. But I'd learned something important in Afghanistan. When you're surrounded and outgunned, you don't retreat. You call in air support. Time to bring in the big guns. Mrs. Eleanor Stokes had been watching our neighborhood like a hawk for 37 years. She knew which teenagers were smoking behind the elementary school, which husbands were cheating on their wives, and which wives were running marriage fraud schemes. Most people found her nosy. I found her invaluable. Edward, dear, come in, she said when I knocked on her door that afternoon. I've been expecting you. Her living room was a shrine to surveillance. 3 different windows with clear views of the street, a police scanner, and a laptop that she used to monitor the neighborhood Facebook groups. Eleanor might have been 73, but she was sharper than most people half her age. You know why I'm here? That wife of yours has been busy. She poured tea from a china set that probably cost more than my truck. 3 different men in the past 18 months, all of them foreign, all of them here on temporary visas. She's running a marriage mill, Edward. You knew? I suspected, but suspicion isn't proof. She handed me a teacup and smiled. However, I may have something more substantial than suspicion. Eleanor walked to her desk and pulled out a thick folder. I've been documenting unusual activity in the neighborhood for years. Insurance purposes, you understand? Amazing what you can see with a good telephoto lens and patience. The folder was full of photographs, timestamps, license plate numbers, and detailed notes. Vanessa meeting with strange men at all hours, money changing hands, documents being signed in parked cars. This is incredible, Mrs. Stokes. Eleanor, please. And there's more. She opened her laptop and showed me a series of screenshots from immigration forums. Your wife has been quite active online, advertising her services to men looking for green card marriages. Very entrepreneurial. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Would you have believed me? Young men in love rarely listen to old women with cameras. She patted my hand gently. Besides, I knew you'd figure it out eventually. You're smarter than she gave you credit for. She's got me over a barrel, Eleanor. Security footage of me breaking into her boyfriend's place, vandalizing his car. She's threatening to have me arrested if I don't give her half of everything. Eleanor's eyes gleamed. Oh, my dear boy. She's made a very serious mistake. What do you mean? Greg Halpern's building doesn't have exterior security cameras. I know because I called the management company last week, pretending to be interested in renting a unit. They specifically mentioned that the lack of cameras was a cost-saving measure. I stared at her. Then the footage is fake, probably cobbled together from stock security footage and manipulated to look like you. Eleanor closed the laptop with satisfaction. She's desperate, Edward. Desperate people make sloppy mistakes. Can you prove the footage is fake? I can do better than that. She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of photos. I was photographing the sunset from my garden last night. Purely for artistic purposes, you understand. When I happened to capture Greg's building in the background. Look at the timestamp. The photos clearly showed Greg's building at the exact time Vanessa claimed I was breaking in. No sign of me, no sign of any criminal activity. Just an empty parking lot and a quiet building. Eleanor, you're a godsend. I'm a bored widow with too much time and excellent equipment. She smiled. Now what do you need me to do? Can you document everything? Make copies, get it notarized, turn it into something that would hold up in court? Already done. I have a friend at the courthouse who handles these things. She handed me a sealed envelope. Sworn affidavit, signed and witnessed. Everything I've observed, photographed, and documented about your wife's activities. What do I owe you? Nothing. But I do have one request. Name it. When you take her down, I want to watch. That evening, I called a meeting at the Blue Moose. Not just Marty this time. I'd assembled my own little army. Jonah Martinez, my old army buddy who now ran the best auto shop in town. Jake Morrison, photographer and digital forensics expert. And Tom Bradley, a private investigator who specialized in marriage fraud cases. Gentlemen, I said, laying out Eleanor's evidence on the sticky bar table, we're going to war. Jonah examined the immigration form screenshots. This is federal crime stuff, Eddie. Marriage fraud, visa fraud, probably tax evasion too. Jake was studying the fake security footage on his laptop. Amateur hour digital manipulation. I can prove this is fake in about 10 minutes. Whoever made this used free software and didn't bother to match the lighting or timestamps properly. Tom was reading Eleanor's affidavit with professional interest. Your neighbor lady's got a future in private investigation. This is better documentation than most of my cases. So, what's our move? Marty asked. We give Vanessa exactly what she wants, I said. A court battle, but not the kind she's expecting. Eddie, you sure about this? Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back. She made her choice when she decided to run a con on me. Now she gets to live with the consequences. I raised my beer bottle. Gentlemen, to assets denied. Assets denied, they echoed. And for the first time in days, I felt like I was back in control. The courthouse in our little Maine town wasn't much to look at. Red brick, white columns, and the kind of small-town dignity that made you believe justice might actually mean something. Judge Patricia Wilcox had been presiding over family court for 15 years, and she had a reputation for cutting through legal nonsense like a hot knife through butter. Vanessa strutted in wearing her most expensive suit, Riley at her side like a well-dressed attack dog. They'd brought a briefcase full of documents, a laptop for their fake evidence, and the kind of confidence that comes from thinking you've already won. I walked in alone, carrying a simple manila folder. Your Honor, Riley began, my client has been the victim of an abusive marriage to a man who has systematically threatened and intimidated her. She seeks only what is fair, half of the marital assets and compensation for the emotional trauma she has endured. Judge Wilcox looked over her reading glasses at me. Mr. Price, are you representing yourself? Yes, Your Honor. I believe the facts speak for themselves. Very well. Ms. Chen, present your evidence. Riley launched into a well-rehearsed speech about emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and my alleged criminal behavior. She played the fake security footage, presented doctored bank statements showing that Vanessa had contributed to household expenses, and painted a picture of an innocent woman trapped in a marriage to a violent, controlling man. Vanessa played her part perfectly. dabbing her eyes with tissues, speaking in a trembling voice about how afraid she'd been, how she'd only stayed because she loved me and hoped I would change. It was a masterful performance. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed it myself. "Mr. Price," Judge Wilcox said when Riley finished, "how do you respond to these allegations?" I opened my manila folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to present some evidence of my own." The first document was Victor Petrov's marriage certificate. "Your Honor, Mrs. Price is not entitled to any marital assets because we were never legally married. She was already married to Mr. Petrov at the time of our ceremony." Riley jumped up. "Objection! This is irrelevant. Sit down, Miss Chen." Judge Wilcox was studying the marriage certificate with interest. "Mr. Price, please continue. This is the second marriage certificate, to Dmitry Volkov, and this is the third, to Alexei Kozlov." I laid them out one by one. "Mrs. Price has been running a marriage fraud scheme for at least 5 years, collecting money from foreign nationals in exchange for green card marriages." Vanessa had gone pale. Riley was frantically whispering in her ear. "Furthermore, Your Honor, the security footage presented by opposing counsel is fabricated." I handed over Jake's digital forensics report. "As you can see from this analysis, the footage was created using stock security camera footage and basic editing software. The timestamps don't match, the lighting is inconsistent, and the metadata shows it was created last Tuesday." Judge Wilcox was no longer looking bored. "Ms. Chen, do you have a response to these allegations?" "Your Honor, these documents could be fabricated. They're certified copies from the Immigration Office and 3 different county clerks," I interrupted, "all notarized and verified. And finally, Your Honor, I have a sworn affidavit from Mrs. Eleanor Stokes, who has been documenting Mrs. Price's activities for the past 18 months. I handed over Eleanor's folder, including photographs, timestamps, and records of Mrs. Price's online activities, advertising marriage services to foreign nationals. The courtroom was dead silent. Judge Wilcox spent several minutes reviewing the evidence, her expression growing darker by the page. "Mrs. Price," she finally said, "would you care to explain these documents?" Vanessa looked at Riley, who was studying her legal pad like it might contain the secret to time travel. No help there. "Your Honor, these documents are... I can explain. I'm waiting. The marriages to the Ukrainian men were business arrangements to help them immigrate. It wasn't fraud. It was humanitarian aid." Judge Wilcox raised an eyebrow. "Humanitarian aid that you charged money for?" Yes, but... "And your marriage to Mr. Price, while you were still married to 3 other men?" I believed the other marriages had been dissolved." "Without divorce papers?" Vanessa had no answer for that. Judge Wilcox closed the folder and looked at both parties. "Ms. Chen, your client has just admitted to multiple counts of marriage fraud, immigration fraud, and perjury in my courtroom. Mr. Price, not only are you not liable for any marital assets, but I'm recommending that the district attorney review this case for criminal charges." Riley was already packing up her briefcase. "Your Honor, we'd like to withdraw our petition." "Too late for that, Counselor. The petition is denied, and I'm issuing a restraining order preventing Mrs. Price from contacting Mr. Price or attempting to claim any of his assets." Judge Wilcox banged her gavel. "Court is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, Vanessa finally dropped her victim act. "You think you've won, Eddie? This isn't over." "Yeah, it is." I pulled out my phone and showed her a text message from Tom Bradley. "Immigration agents are at Greg's condo right now. Seems someone tipped them off about his visa status and his relationship with a known marriage fraud suspect. He's being deported." "You bastard." "And Riley, she's about to have a very interesting conversation with the State Bar Association about suborning perjury and presenting fabricated evidence." I smiled. "But hey, look on the bright side. You'll have plenty of time to think about your choices. Federal prison sentences for marriage fraud run about 5 years." Vanessa stared at me with pure hatred. "How did you figure it out?" "I didn't. Mrs. Stokes did. Turns out, when you run cons in a small town, someone's always watching." I started walking toward my truck. "Oh, and Vanessa, The house, the business, the truck, they're all still mine. Assets denied. She was still standing on the courthouse steps when I drove away, finally understanding that she'd picked the wrong mark. 3 days later, Vanessa was arrested at the airport, trying to board a flight to Kiev. Greg had already been deported. Riley was suspended from practicing law, pending a disciplinary hearing. And me? I went back to fixing things. Pipes, cabinets, and the occasional broken marriage. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's just letting the truth do the talking. Mrs. Stokes invited me over for tea the next week. I told you she'd made a mistake, she said, pouring from her good china. What mistake was that? She underestimated the power of a nosy old woman with a camera and too much time on her hands. Eleanor smiled. Some assets can't be denied, Edward. Like justice. I raised my teacup in a toast. To justice, Eleanor, and to nosy neighbors. Amen to that, dear boy. Amen to that.